Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of What Happened. Today, we're diving into one of the most explosive diplomatic crises happening right now in Asia. And it's a story that involves economic warfare, political gambles, and a single comment that completely shattered 70 years of careful diplomacy. Picture this. It's February 25th, 2026, and China just declared economic war on Japan. Not in some subtle, behind-the-scenes way. We're talking about a targeted strike that hit 40 of Japan's biggest companies, including industrial giants like Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Kawasaki Heavy. Overnight, these corporations found themselves cut off from Chinese dual-use goods and materials they need to operate. But here's where this story gets really wild. Instead of panicking or backing down, Japan's response was basically to shrug and double down. And the reason why tells us everything about how dramatically the relationship between these two Asian superpowers has changed in just a few months. This isn't just another trade dispute. This is the story of how one woman decided to break 7 decades of diplomatic tradition, triggered the biggest China-Japan crisis since World War II, and somehow became more popular with her own people because of it. Let me tell you about Sanae Takaichi, Japan's Iron Lady, the first female prime minister in Japanese history, and the woman who just gambled her entire political career on standing up to China. When Takaichi took office in October 2025, she was already making history as Japan's first female prime minister. But what made her different wasn't just her gender, it was her confrontational approach to politics. She modeled herself after Margaret Thatcher, wearing signature blue outfits and adopting her tough political style. The Japanese media dubbed the excitement Sanamania, and she connected with younger voters like no Japanese politician had in decades. Her approval ratings hit 75%, numbers most politicians only dream of. But beneath the modern style were traditional conservative views. She wanted to revise the pacifist constitution, expand military capabilities, and most importantly, for our story, she had never hidden her strong support for Taiwan. And then, on November 7th, 2025, she said something that changed everything. It was supposed to be a routine budget committee meeting in Japan's parliament, the kind that gets zero media attention. But when asked about Taiwan, Takaichi gave an answer no Japanese leader had ever given. She stated that if China used military force against Taiwan, it could constitute a survival-threatening situation for Japan, potentially triggering Japan's right to collective self-defense, essentially meaning Japan might intervene militarily to defend the island. This was a bombshell because Japan has spent 5 decades carefully avoiding any clear Taiwan position. Since the 1970s, Japanese leaders maintained strategic ambiguity, acknowledging China's claim while never saying what they'd do if conflict broke out. This ambiguity was the foundation of China-Japan relations. It allowed hundreds of billions in economic cooperation while avoiding the one topic that could destroy everything. With a few sentences, Takaichi threw that framework out the window. The reaction from Beijing was swift and furious. Chinese officials went into attack mode, calling her comments erroneous and dangerous, and demanding immediate retraction. China's consul general in Osaka made inflammatory social media posts with threatening language that shocked diplomatic observers. China moved quickly to economic retaliation. Travel advisories, canceled flights, restricted seafood imports. Chinese tourists make up nearly a quarter of foreign visitors to Japan, so this hit hard economically. Most experts expected Takaichi to do what Japanese leaders always do, clarify her remarks and try to smooth things over diplomatically. But Takaichi did something that stunned everyone. She doubled down completely. Not only did she refuse to retract her comments, she insisted she had nothing to apologize for. And that's when something fascinating happened. Instead of the confrontation hurting Takaichi domestically, it made her more popular. What happened was a textbook rally around the flag effect. When Japanese voters saw China making threats against their prime minister, instead of being scared, they got angry. Young people started following her social media, and the tough stance resonated with a Japanese public increasingly skeptical of Beijing's growing regional military presence. By December 2025, her approval ratings were sitting at an incredible 75%, essentially unchanged from when the crisis started. The confrontation had become proof that Takaichi was a strong leader who wouldn't be intimidated. But China wasn't backing down either. Throughout late 2025, both sides continued escalating. China ramped up military patrols, imposed more restrictions, and kept calling Takaichi a militarist. Japan strengthened defense ties with Taiwan and continued making statements Beijing saw as provocative. Then Takaichi made a decision that was either brilliant or completely reckless. She called a snap election. This was an enormous gamble. She'd only been prime minister for months, but she calculated that the China confrontation had strengthened her position. The election became a referendum on her tough stance. Her party ran on standing up to foreign intimidation, while opposition parties argued she was being reckless. The results were historic. Takaichi's party won the largest majority for any Japanese government since World War II, a two-thirds supermajority giving her more power than any Japanese leader has had in decades. Instead of moderating after victory, Takaichi took her mandate as proof voters wanted her hardline approach. She moved forward with defense equipment export changes China had criticized as remilitarization and strengthened military cooperation with the U.S. And then China decided to escalate dramatically. On February 25, 2026, just 2 weeks after Takaichi's electoral triumph, China announced export restrictions targeting 40 Japanese entities. This wasn't gradual pressure. This was a precision strike at Japan's defense and high-tech industries. The list of companies targeted read like a who's who of Japanese industry. 20 companies were placed on an export control list, completely cutting them off from Chinese dual-use goods. These included multiple subsidiaries of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries involved in shipbuilding and aircraft engines, parts of Kawasaki Heavy Industries, Fujitsu, and even Japan's National Defense Academy. Another 20 companies, including Subaru Corporation and Mitsubishi Materials, were placed on a watch list requiring special licenses and risk assessments for any Chinese exports to them. China's message was crystal clear. These companies contribute to Japan's remilitarization, and China would no longer provide them with the materials they needed to operate. The economic implications were staggering. These companies were cut off from dual-use goods, including critical rare earth minerals and advanced materials that China dominates globally. Some analysts estimated the restrictions could cost Japanese industry billions of dollars and disrupt supply chains across multiple sectors. But perhaps more importantly, this was China using its economic leverage as a weapon in a way that went far beyond normal trade disputes. Beijing was essentially saying, if you're going to threaten us militarily, we'll respond economically with precision strikes against your defense industry. Japan's reaction was predictably furious. Government officials called the restrictions absolutely unacceptable and said they violated international trade practices. But they also made it clear they had no intention of backing down from their Taiwan position. Tokyo issued formal protests, with one official saying the measures were deplorable and would never be tolerated. But Takaichi herself remained defiant, essentially treating the Chinese restrictions as validation that her tough stance was working. And this brings us to where we stand today. Two of Asia's most important economies locked in an escalating confrontation that shows no signs of stopping. So what happens next? Nobody has a clear answer. Both countries have enormous economic stakes. China is Japan's largest trading partner, and Japan provides critical high-tech components to China. Complete economic divorce would devastate both sides. But we're dealing with fundamental questions of national security neither side will compromise on. For China, Taiwan is a core interest they'll defend at any cost. For Japan, Chinese military action near their territory is an existential threat. The broader context makes this more dangerous. The U.S. just approved an $11 billion weapons package for Taiwan. This isn't just China-Japan, it's about Pacific power balance. Some analysts think economic interests will eventually force both sides to step back. Others worry we're seeing a shift toward bipolar Asia, forcing countries to choose between China and a Japan-U.S. alliance. What makes this unpredictable is personality. Takaichi built her brand on being tough on China. Backing down could destroy her credibility. Xi Jinping has made Taiwan central to his legacy and can't appear weak. Two strong leaders have made this personal and national pride. That's exactly how situations spiral out of control, even when both sides prefer peace. The economic consequences are already here. Japanese companies scrambling for alternative suppliers, Chinese businesses losing Japanese technology access, volatile stock markets, disrupted global supply chains. Most worrying is the military dimension. Both countries are conducting more patrols in disputed areas with several close encounters that could have triggered incidents. In this charged atmosphere, accidents could spark the very conflict both sides claim to avoid. The stakes couldn't be higher. The future of Asia, the global economy, and the international order since World War II. All tracing back to one woman's decision to say what no Japanese leader ever said before, that Japan might fight for Taiwan. That's it for this episode of What Happened. This is definitely a story we'll be following closely as it develops, because the outcome could reshape not just East Asia, but the entire global balance of power. Let me know in the comments what you think about this crisis. Do you think both sides will eventually find a way to step back, or are we heading towards something much bigger? If you want more videos analyzing major international developments that are shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.